This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only.
I just want to say a personal note of how excited I am about this panel. I had seen some work that had been put together in LA with a group of designers taking some urban challenges in LA and addressing those in a very imaginative way. And I tracked down the organizers and sent them an email late at night, and I said, would you possibly consider doing this with us in San Diego? And they'd never heard of CEOs for Cities, but they were so gracious to agree not only to come and join us, but to find three great designers around the country to join them and address challenges in cities. So I'm thrilled that you were about your responsiveness, and thanks to all the panelists for being with us today. So at that, Alyssa, I'm going to turn it to you.
My name is Alyssa Walker. I'm a writer. I write about design, architecture, urban issues, a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about. And this is so exciting because we feel like we sometimes write and talk about design and people don't understand it. And you guys totally get it. And it was so inspiring to be sitting in here and hearing your conversations, because it means that I'm doing my job and somehow it's working. So thank you so much. And then this is Casey. I'll let him introduce himself.
I'm Casey Kaplow, the creative director and one of the founders for Good, and I think for various reasons, Good is sort of how we ended up here. Alyssa's done a bunch of wonderful writing and design for us. Just to introduce us, this is sort of a slide that quickly says who we are. We're a magazine, website, videos, events for people who give a damn. We started our magazine about 2.5 years ago, and really with this idea that there was something going on in the world, that people sort of cared more, they gave a damn. They wanted to engage with the world around them in sort of new and creative ways, and we sort of wanted to be there to celebrate that, to encourage that, to give people, some direction in that, and it's sort of been an evolving effort since then. So I guess to go to the next slide. This is also actually Scott, who's here, who's designed the magazine, helped put this together from a media kit. Good is also a whole bunch of different things, because really to that point, it's an idea, and it's this constant exploration of what good is. And that's sort of what we're always doing, and we hope to involve as many people as possible. And I think for us, design has always been a big part of what we do and a big sort of means through which we see the world. I think cities and urbanism is definitely like a focus, one of our focuses. So. Yeah, jumping ahead.
So we often get asked, since we're associated with Good, well, what's good design? And we actually did a design issue that had an AK-47 on the front of it to kind of provoke, I think, some interesting discussions about what actually means good design. We have some of those issues here that we'll pass out at lunch to give to you. But I think that another really interesting question about what good design is, and there's been a huge change in the last year. Most of you guys have heard of organizations like Architecture for Humanity, things like the things like what Brad Pitt did in New Orleans, the Make It Right Foundation, where they built houses for people, victims of Hurricane Katrina. But there's also a very interesting thing that you might not know about called the Designers Accord, which was actually founded by one of our panelists, Valerie Casey. And this is a kind of voluntary pledge for designers all over the world to just do more meaningful work. And so this actually number, it was 100,000 firms. It's actually more like 150,000 firms now, right? Or maybe,
yeah.
maybe more, yeah, more than that. So all these designers are kind of agreeing that they're going to do stuff that matters, and through all their different organizations. So this is definitely happening, and designers are on your side. And you probably are all familiar with something like this, which is the Design for the Other 90%. You guys all know what this is? It was an exhibition that was at the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum in New York. and all about designing, designers today design for 10% of the population, the richest percent of the population. And now there's a movement to design things for third world countries, low-income residents, just people who need design more. And this is one of the most famous kind of trademark designs that was featured in this exhibition. It's a water pump that farmers can use to bring up water that's safe to drink or to water their crops from, in ways that they would not have been able to do it with their own technology and devices around them. So we know this is happening, but at the same time, we really want you to think of design as broader than just designing a logo or designing a building. And I think that also fits in a lot with Good's philosophy.
Yeah, I think one of the things when we did the design issue, it was, I think, came at a moment where we wanted to sort of help take back and change the conversation about design. And this was happening, but going from a thing where you thought of design as about aesthetics and about making products or designing a logo, and it really is about problem solving, and that is the sort of really special skill and imaginative sort of ability of designers, is this ability to sort of try to create some certain impact in the world, be it through a logo, but also anything else. And I think design as a sort of community has really been changing and embracing that very thoroughly over the last few years, and that's sort of this moment right now. And I think 2008, Alyssa did a recap for us, really sort of that sort of hit a high note, and I think people really felt like design is this way to solve problems and a very new, sort of timely way to look at the world and fix the problems around us.
Which is good because we have problems. This was like the worst day in LA with the fire, our wildfire season now that we have annually, but this was just one of those days that I looked out my window in Hollywood and I was like, man, I live in a really great city, but this sucks. And I was just looking at it. It was like hard to breathe, and there's this horrible construction going on that's been going on forever. There's traffic. And so I think that, I think we all have similar problems in our cities. We've talked a lot about the problems, but I was also really concerned because recently I had heard something about a tent city outside of Sacramento. Did anybody else hear about that on the news, right? So I was like, this is a really good way to illustrate a problem. Like, the third world problems are coming to us, number one. And number two, well, how do you even begin to solve something like that? And I looked it up online, and I actually found this tent city in Ontario, California 2 years ago. And I just can't even believe that this is something. I didn't know anything about this, and I'm not sure if any of you guys were aware of this, but this has been happening for a long time. And I think we forget about problems, we sweep them under the rug, and we don't really think about how we could solve them. But also, how do you start to solve this problem? Do you just build these people houses? It's more complex than that, right? It can't just be. So there's a really amazing book, and Teddy Cruz is actually featured prominently in this book, one of the next panelists, one of the next speakers. And this is a really great new book that shows solutions where architects and designers and all different from all different backgrounds are using their skills in different ways that don't just focus on what they were taught, how to design a house. They're really using their skills in a completely different way that can change cities and communities and people's lives. And we'll have a toolkit online for you guys to download with all this information, so you can buy this book and read all about these great projects. And one of the coolest projects, is there anyone here from Atlanta? Okay, so I used to live in Atlanta, and I live very close to this. And this is a guy named Ryan Gravel. And this is, thank you for laughing. And this is probably one of the coolest. I used to live by one of these abandoned railways in Atlanta. They have tons of them, as many cities do. And he was a grad student at Georgia Tech. Wasn't like a transportation specialist, wasn't anyone that, really understood, what to do with these abandoned railways. But he looked at all the ones in the area and decided that they would make a great loop for an awesome new transit system that would also be mixed-use developments, a sustainable bikeway, all these. I'm sure you know more about this than me, but it was an amazing proposal, and it's happening. The right person talked to him at the right time and got this to be an actual proposal that was put in front of the city. And this is like a $1 billion project that. $3 billion? Oh, so it's gigantic. That's actually happening. So there's like a rendering of one of the new
areas. And we also have someone else on our side. I don't know if you guys know that he said he wanted to be an architect when he was growing up. But there was a comment when the person was on the phone today just about how he's a real grassroots problem solver. And he came from a community and dealt with problems from the bottom up. And I think that makes Barack Obama a design thinker. I do believe that he's definitely on our side. Look at him, he's like solving problems, like right there. He's drawing chalk lines. So the other people you have on your side are all these design organizations. And are you guys familiar with some of these, maybe all of these? So these are all people in your cities who belong to these organizations, all different backgrounds. And they've come together to propose a U.S. National Design Policy Initiative. And this is a document and a movement that's have taken to D.C. to try to give design a greater voice, showing its power to help communities, showing its ability to help, economic competitiveness right now, which is what we need a lot, more than anything probably right now. So I think I'm going to hand this part over to Casey again.
Sure. So yeah, it's just getting back to good design, and broadly speaking, but also as we're looking to cities and solving problems here. And one of the things that we want to say is, again, well, the focus here is to point the attention to designers and how do we tap into them. So one point is it's not pro bono work. There is, and a great tradition of designers doing pro bono work to help out causes, to help out nonprofits. But that's not what we sort of see this conversation being about. This is about actively engaging the design community to tap their brains and create new and exciting solutions to the problems around us. So it is that. It's solving community problems. And again, it's locally acting, action-oriented things. It's really, there's so much creativity from this community that I guess we've had an amazing experience working with and tapping into, and I'm sure you guys have on various levels, but we sort of want to encourage more of that. And again, this sort of civic service through design thinking. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but there is this phrase of design thinking, which is this sort of, it's almost a methodology of how you approach problem solving through design. And I think our cities, our communities can very much be greatly served through that. And really engaging with local government. We'll talk later, but about having designers with the city as their client, but really working with the local neighborhoods, with local governments, with city governments, and just those local constituencies. Like, I think a really, really amazing, surprising things can happen, and that's really what it's about, is collaboration. It's bringing, meshing the right problem with the right problem solver and the right tools and
the right money.
Right money. And again, I'll keep saying it, but amazing things can happen. So do you want to?
You can say,
So I mean, this is WPA stuff from back in the day. But one of the last times the country really embarked on a grand approach to putting people to work. And I think from a design perspective, like, there were amazing posters, and there's new movements of like this going on with designers just taking it up on their own to promote the cause. So today you've got new marks showing up for how, like, the recovery.gov and this tiger logo are going to show up on the stimulus bill, and things that just so to create this sense of transparency that's really important to our new way of the world, and so that we know what's been flagged in what area. And we're sort of, I don't know if this is totally serious, but proposing, like, maybe there's like a good design mark that, like solutions that come out of these kinds of environments, like, we can note as good design. And this is sort of identifying this collaborative nature, the fact that we're trying to solve problems and make the world better. So again, I think this, now we get into I guess really what brought us here, which was Alyssa and I were wanting to do an event, a design event in LA, and we had done some events actually with Scott in New York the last year. And again, the design community and Good are very tight, and we've always had a very good time together. But when we looked to Los Angeles, we wanted to do something more new and fresh, and we asked, like, well, what if we ask the designers that we know to take on the city as their client? You know, what would happen? And we create something new through this. And so that's what we did, and we brought a bunch of people together to do that. So, you know, looking to, you get these people together and ask, like, you know, them to look to their neighborhoods, the areas they live in. We're in Los Angeles. As many of you I'm sure know, it's like the interests in one part of town are wildly different than the interests in another part of town. And so you get just a bunch of different brains and a bunch of different local situations to address things very, very specifically. And again, what if we had an event where designers could share their ideas with the community and bring people together, and you know, there's interesting, diverse people in the crowd like this, people who represent different businesses, different constituencies, different, you know, funding sources or interests, and that's really where wonderful things can happen when, you know, there's a lot of design events, and we've been a part of them in the past, where it's a bunch of designers showing work to the design community, wonderful ideas, and everyone's excited and feels inspired seeing great work, but often nothing can come of it because no one's there to do anything about it. And I think it's really rooms like this where you get different people together, and that's where progress can be made and magic can happen. And the events with free drinks that might be covered by these guys down there. But
That's an important part of the formula.
So this was an event that we did in December. We organized it and asked people that we thought were great designers to come together. And we can just go really fast through. The problems were just, this was one for food cart vendors, which we all have in our cities, and finding the solution was to have them do service for the areas that they were parking their carts in, so people at the city would see them as more of a value instead of, you know, clogging up the streets. This was a walk to school program that was proposed to cut down on rush hour traffic, and this is actually groups bounded together because of meeting at this event. This was a proposal for LA's strip malls to make them more like art installations and contribute more to the streetscape. This was an artist who wanted to have more hand-painted signs in the city. He thought that the vinyl signs were horrible and ugly, and so he wanted to go out and he proved that you could hand-paint a sign that was more beautiful in the time he gave his presentation. It was very wonderful. And this is someone who proposed that we all need to work from home and free up the downtown office buildings so people can live in them and live together, live nearby each other, and enjoy the cities more so we don't spend so much time commuting to work. And this was one of our favorites. We wanted a solution for earthquakes. And so this designer decided that we should break apart the state of California during places that already had high tension and high stress, and using explosives. And so we would actually divide the state up in ways that, you know, natural boundaries. And then he would create new forms of Hollywood entertainment to help us cope with some of these problems that of those faults splitting apart. So very light and also very serious solutions. And then we were approached by Art Center College of Design, which is in Pasadena, to do this again with their students. And these were really amazing. We brought in Kurt Anderson, who's the host of Studio 360. You guys might know him. He kind of opened the evening for us, worked with the students to make sure that their ideas were more sound. And we also brought in Krista Klein, who works in the mayor's office, who was able to kind of frame the evening for us and give her feedback. And the students were amazing. This was someone who wanted to bring herds of goats to clear the brush, to prevent wildfires, which is actually happening in a lot of places. Has been for quite some time. This was an iPhone app that you could aim at street signs you didn't know, and it would translate it for you. This student was very frustrated that he didn't know what all these different places were, didn't know what these stores were.
Lots of iPhone.
Yeah, lots of iPhone apps. iPhone apps can save the world, amazingly. This was a student who was frustrated that in his community, every store was a liquor store and didn't sell fresh fruit or any kind of healthy food. And so he proposed a reality show called Council Swap that would be on Fox, where the Beverly Hills councilman would switch places with the one in his East LA. We actually, it's amazing, right? A great idea. And we actually had a producer contact us afterwards, and he's like, I'm pitching this. Let's write a proposal. This is a great idea. Such a good idea. And then another student had a problem with fame. He was really concerned that LA had a bad reputation because of fame, because of our quest for fame. And he made up this map or this figure of how you achieve fame, which I thought was so thoughtful and so interesting. You can see, like, if you're heading up, you have a kidney-shaped pool, but as you go back down, you're wrecked to renting, which is, very bad. So, he came up with a website where you can meet the real celebrities of LA and have real experiences, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, Los Angeles, pretty great. So we asked you guys what your problems were.
Yeah, so we asked, Carol got in touch, and sort of, I think we're proposing this a little bit as not only tapping into designers, but also as a framework, like having events like this. You do get the crazy ideas like exploding California off the coast, and also more serious ones. You can implement like, some street vendor programs, and then something in between, like let's pitch a show to Fox. So it's like fun and inspirational and stimulating, and so we asked Carol like to reach out to you guys and sort of what your problems are, and we got some great responses back from, I think we heard some interesting things from Cincinnati, about certain like geographic, basically just questions like how do we work with the special problems of our city. I think Miami got in touch, Buffalo, and we got some really interesting ideas, and when we put this together, we found three friends and designers whose work we really like, and sort of also showing you guys, we sort of have a graphic designer, communication designer, we have a more product, even like systems designer, and an architect, and so there's sort of people coming at it from different ways, and we shared with them the problems and said, sort of pull from these themes, but also look to your local community because these are the things that you're going to know best. And so that's what we're going to share with you. And so that's what's going to come up next. And we'll follow up on this. Yeah, let us know how we can help you, how these guys specifically can help you. Or also we can help you do this in your city. And one of the things that we do want to follow up on afterwards on the CEOs for Cities website is give you some of the basics, some of the tools for like how to do this in your area on your own, or if you do want to tap into us to help do it, we're more than happy to help.
As long as you have free drinks, then we'll
That's right. So, with no further ado.
Our first speaker is Scott Stoll.
Hi. So Casey and Alyssa asked me to just start with a couple slides that talk about what we do at our studio so you know who's talking to you. And then we'll get into sort of the problem that we created and tried to solve. So our studio is called Open. It's a very small studio. We do a wide range of work. I'll go very quickly. This is a identity system for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, videos for Jazz at Lincoln Center. This is a study we're doing now with the Alliance for Downtown New York about a neighborhood that's being kind of reconfigured, hopefully. Signage for a museum in New Haven. This is probably the world record holder for the simplest logo that you will ever see. This is a logo we did for a TV network called Planet Green. It is a green dot. There's our Mayor Bloomberg in front of a piece we did to promote a campaign about Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is being developed in New York right now. And finally, of course, the design of Good Magazine, which these guys have already talked about. New issue coming out soon. This is it. Oh, there's some here. Advanced copies here. And it's full of lots of wonky policy information that everyone here will love. So we actually focused on two of the challenges that were received. Only one of these had someone's name on it, so I was very political and left both names off so as not to offend anyone, or to offend both of them, I guess. But this one talked about food trucks, and I won't go through the whole thing, but basically this is a person from New York City talking about the kind of proliferation of different food trucks in New York, and it's become kind of a fad over the last few years, starting with things like ice cream trucks, of course, that everybody knows, and now in Manhattan we have, this is the Mud Truck, which is the best coffee you can get in town, and this is a dessert truck that has very fancy desserts. And there's even a waffle truck, which is run by some crazy Belgians that serve waffles out of a truck. And this notion of a truck that would bring something to you, not necessarily food, was really fascinating to us. So the novelty of it is very exciting. All the joy that you get from an ice cream truck as a kid, and then the surprise when it's not actually an ice cream truck, seemed like a really interesting thing. So starting there, we went to this very interesting challenge, which is about, people call it the third place. People go home, they go to work, and Starbucks in particular likes to call themselves your third place, that other place like your neighborhood bar or your coffee shop or whatever, the other place that you like to go. And this particular challenge was particularly about Starbucks. A lot of them are closing, and it's very expensive, and people don't go there as much, so what will be the third place? But I was really fascinated with the last sentence here. Is there a model for a new public amenity that would serve a similar function as the third place? So that's sort of where we started our thinking. And we started thinking about other precedents for this sort of thing. The bookmobile, which is a thing that a lot of places still do and have done for many years, is kind of a fascinating idea that this would come to town and bring knowledge, or to your neighborhood, bring knowledge and books and so on. But then there are other things, like even just the tradition of guys playing dominoes or cards out on the street in certain neighborhoods. This is in Europe, but it happens all over New York, and there are chess tables in the parks and so on. This becomes a kind of private use of a public space in an ad hoc way. This is an interesting project that was done a few years ago in Amsterdam. This is a place called Food Facility, and basically it was a restaurant full of tables and chairs, but no kitchen, and lots of takeout menus. So basically you would go there, it's a completely non-commercial entity where you would go to and order food and have it delivered to this public place. And you could actually go and say, oh, I want to get a pizza, I want to get Chinese food. Well, let's go there, we can all eat together and have this communal experience. So it was basically an art project, but it was really fascinating to us that you could create this sort of non-commercial thing that was sort of fun and interesting for people to gather at. And finally, this is a project that was actually featured in Good Magazine a couple years ago called Parking Day. And this is an idea where groups basically go and feed the meter of a real parking space, and they turn public parking into a public park by rolling out AstroTurf and putting out chairs. And it is completely legal to do this because it does not say that you have to put a car in a space when you're paying for the parking. So you see people driving around the block saying, oh, I don't want that space. But then, of course, 10 or 20 people can enjoy it rather than the empty car that was just sitting there. So this idea of reusing public space in a different way was really interesting to us. Plus, it costs almost nothing. So we came up with an idea based on the economy as it is these days. You see this photo was taken in New York last week outside my office. And it's getting really bad. We can't afford color anymore. And but as you know, obviously the economy is having troubles and people are out of work and so on. And there was a really interesting article in the Times last weekend where organizations, particularly in New York, are getting flooded with volunteers now because people are out of work and they have the spirit of wanting to help, and also the president has encouraged everyone to do this. And so this is a quote: "Can you make them stop calling?" This is a head of some nonprofit. Everybody's inspired by Obama, but they also don't have jobs. And so these places are getting overrun. So again, there's this kind of surplus of willing, free labor and time in a way. So we started looking at some other precedents. This is a website called Volunteer Match, which basically is kind of a matchmaker for groups that need help and people that want to help. This is the Park Slope Food Co-op in Brooklyn and New York. There's organizations like this all around the country where people give their time. They work a couple of hours a month, and then they're a member of the club, and they get cheap groceries and so on, cheaper. And finally, this is one of my favorite ideas. This is FreeCycle, which is a website and a kind of idea where basically if you have stuff you want to get rid of, and you think it might be valuable, you post it on the website. And we've gotten rid of so much stuff this way: computers, supplies, and all different kinds of stuff that people just come by and say, oh, I could use that. I'll take that for free, and you don't have to dispose of it. So it's a way to pool resources in a time when things aren't as plentiful as they were. So we started with this, and finally, the simplest give and take is this take a penny, leave a penny that you see at the deli. I always thought this was a beautiful little moment that you just leave your change and somebody takes it, and it's this unspoken agreement among all of us. So we started with the idea of give and take and said, well, what can we give and take that's not money, that's not commercial? You can give your time, you can take time, you can give and take stuff and trade it, and also ideas can be given and taken. So we came up with this idea, the give and take machine. We're back to the ice cream truck. So basically this is a truck that would drive around staffed by volunteers. It's called the give and take machine. Here's the rest of the design of it. The front is reversed, of course, for the rear view mirror, like the ambulance. When it gets up behind you, you want to read it. But anyway, so you can give time. It's a place where basically volunteers would know about different organizations and opportunities to help them. So you could go there and sign up. Also, the organizations themselves would post flyers here, like on a website, but in real life, because this is meant to really bring people together physically in the city. So help us out, you can go there and help them out. You can give stuff you don't want, drop it off at the truck. If somebody else comes along and wants it, they can take it. If nobody takes it, at the end of the day, the truck brings it off to Salvation Army or wherever it goes. And then, of course, you can give and take ideas. Maybe it becomes a funny kind of soapbox where you can go and talk to people. And also, we could have event listings and even a little kind of patio that would happen outside the truck. Again, like the parking day idea, it's a space created for almost nothing where kind of interesting interactions between people can happen. Again, the idea is this is totally non-commercial, so of course it has to get paid for a little bit. So of course there's always donations, you know, tip jar and all that. But then these days we've found, particularly by working with Good, that there are a lot of organizations and corporations that want to get associated with doing good work and not just underwriting a museum show or something. So we found a few companies who we have not talked to, we just stole their logos, of course, but who have mission statements or kind of advertising campaigns that would support this kind of thing. So Liberty Mutual has a thing called the Responsibility Project, which is about helping people. T-Mobile, cell phones, their thing is all about sticking together. And again, it's not a stretch to think that they might sponsor something like this. And then Cisco Systems talks about the effect of the human network and how we're all connected and all the things we do can help each other. So hopefully something like this will happen one of these days and the giving and the taking can keep going. Thanks.
So I'm Valerie Casey, I'm from IDEO, and like Alyssa mentioned, I started something called the Designer's Accord, which is basically what we call a Kyoto Treaty for design. Started about 1.5 years ago, and it's grown in epic proportions. We have over 150,000 people involved in it from 100 countries across the world. And we do all sorts of events and meetups and things like this, and the whole idea is counterintuitive. It is to take a traditionally quite a competitive industry, the creative industry, and actually get people to work together around sustainability, so creating social impact and environmental impact. And we've just, you know, it's incredibly inspiring because it helps us to find all of these pockets of people and groups and organizations that are similarly trying to take on, you know, these intractable challenges of our time. So that's my little bit about the Designer's Accord. But I also work at IDEO, which maybe some of you have heard of. We're an international innovation firm, design and innovation firm, been around for about 30 years. And known for some really iconic products, one of them being the computer mouse, designed the first Mac mouse and Microsoft, or sorry, PC mouse. And over the 30 years, we've really moved from being pure kind of design stylists and mechanical engineers to being design thinkers. And that term has come up a lot. And the way I kind of like to describe design thinking is that it's really all about empathy. So if design thinking has kind of 3 parts to it, one is the human element, one is the technology element, and one is the business element. It's all about balancing those 3 elements, but coming in from the human perspective first. So we try to practice a lot of like walking in other people's shoes. And it's actually one of the reasons why we took some of the design challenges that were described by this group and actually localized them, found a similarity to our local environment in San Francisco so that we could actually take on this challenge in a couple of days. So IDEO now, what I do at IDEO is I run a group, I co-run a group that's a global group that's called Systems at Scale. And we focus on problems, I just come back from DC, challenges that have to do with the government and have to do with cities and have to do with the large systems that we are all involved in all different kinds of ways. And what we try to do is find little moments in those systems where we can make slight changes and actually have huge impact. And it seems like a timely kind of perspective around design, especially in these economic times, because it is about these kind of small changes. So the problem that, the challenge that we aggregated from the wonderful provocations that were sent in was really around these infrastructural dividers in our cities that have been kind of these traditionally non-designed spaces. It's so funny when a cell phone goes off and the person whose phone it is like panics for a second. Okay, everybody relax. And these crazy spaces that are the centers of many of our cities, or significant parts of some of our cities, that are really undesigned, and they really separate communities. So we started to think about how can we actually work with those spaces in a more productive way, and actually sort of celebrate separateness and autonomy and identity as a way to kind of rethink community, rather than imagining that we're all part of the same community, but actually just celebrating the differences. And so what we did was we looked at San Francisco's Market Street, and many of you probably have been to San Francisco, I'm sure, or at least know about it. And Market Street is just one of these dead zones. You know, it spans the entire city, and it is in some portions of it truly frightening, and other portions, you know, it's like full of people just smoking in front of their buildings where they work, and then other places are outrageous and interesting and very cultural. But as a whole, it's a really, it's sort of the dead zone of San Francisco. And there's all sorts of things like this around where it looks like there was a project that someone had started at some point that just got abandoned. Like maybe they forgot where they were on Market Street, because it all sort of vaguely looks the same. And just really, a lot of people use this as a pass-through in a kind of a very unfortunate way. So in our typical IDEO way, what we did was we went out, we spent about 3 days doing a little bit of work around this, and we did a lot of observations and had a lot of phone calls and, a lot of sort of impromptu conversations with people, and came up with these 4 principles for new thinking around this. And one of them, the first one is about the grand gesture. And if typically in urban design, at least the way some of us were trained, it's really about this grand orchestration of great changes. And what we're actually advocating is, instead of having the grand gesture, really focusing on the point intervention. So small little transformations that can happen, that can be rapidly prototyped. That's another quality of design thinking, is that it is about rapid prototyping as well. So not being married to all of this entire system, putting it all in place, and then saying, okay, now someone go and build it, but actually prototyping it and really changing the sort of the cadence of development. The next thing is large-scale infrastructure, changing that really to human-centered design. And we've seen this in lots of different urban renewal projects, like Times Square now in New York. When Tibor Kalman and Bob Stern designed 42nd Street, 42nd Street now, right, is the name of the project, they actually forced businesses to have, to only have a storefront that was 30 feet long. So even Toys R Us, which is a mega store, could only have 30 feet of sidewalk space, because you have to continue the visual interest, and really focusing on, from someone who's 4'6" to 5'4". That's where the visual interest should be in terms of eye level. Changing this notion from a space of passive transition, where people are really just trying to get from A to B, to actually an articulated journey. So how can you punctuate these large undesigned spaces so that they're actually much more interesting? And then thinking about connecting those disparate parts as communities. And again, it's not as one community, but as these multiple different sort of reference points. And so we use a lot of design exercises to kind of get our thinking, to get ourselves thinking in a new sort of way. And this is one of the ones that was, I thought, pretty fun that we did. We took program, anything that's sort of the intention of the space, and had these little tags. The intention of the space is to design something where people can engage or consume or avoid or spectate, make and sell, and put those together with different kinds of contexts. So, a plaza, a bus island, a foyer, a curb, taking those and actually starting to put them together. So some of the early sketches were on the top left here, Play and BART entry. BART is our public transportation system, and so one of the designers had designed a circular slide that you could actually slide into the public transport. On the top right there, Spectate and Bus Island, and so somebody suggested that we could have like a spectator tower on top of the bus island where people could actually climb up and just sort of observe the city's happenings. Engage and Plaza on the bottom left. This is kind of like a dock in the box, sort of a more productive way that you could set up these little kiosks in plazas and just actually respond to people's needs in a very immediate way rather than trying to, organize all infrastructure. And the bottom one, this is actually happening in some places around the world. Consume and the lamp pole and the designer is suggesting that there's a sort of a solar panel on the top, and rather than the lamp post just being something that you walk by, these folks have brought out their TV and have plugged it in, and they're watching TV together. So imagine if you could draw energy from things like that. So the design interventions, we came up with a couple of design interventions around this framework called Relate, Redefine, and Recharge. And Relate is about the individual relating to each other. Redefine is about communities kind of articulating their difference. And Recharge is about how do you use space. And so just very quickly, this is a space in San Francisco. And what we suggested, there's a lot of, we get a lot of work like what's the future of newspapers and what's the future of media. And so this is kind of an idealized space where there could be little Twitter feeds in the bottom. On the right-hand side, there's a couple of kiosks there that are sort of getting cut off. But you can imagine taking your phone or writing something in there to encourage citizen journalism. And then when it really struck us that when Obama was inaugurated, there were all these events, public events, to watch the inauguration. And so you can imagine that instead of, while people won't have newspapers anymore, let's say, they become the opposite of that. It's not an individual exercise, but it's a collective exercise of kind of watching and discussing the news. So on the left-hand side of this billboard is all local stuff of events and community voices and job matching, and then on the right-hand side you can imagine global events like this. So really a really robust mixture of media, but it's not about passively consuming news, but actually kind of collectively engaging in it. Redefine, this is a shot from the Castro district down Market Street, and we started to imagine if you were able to actually call attention to the unique communities that live around Market Street like this, and start to celebrate the cross-section. So literally this literal cross-section becomes a really interesting portion, a design canvas where you could actually call to attention. So that's the rainbow flag and the Castro, and this is a Vietnamese lantern down on 6th Street, which is just next to Little Saigon. And so these become these really colorful, just amazing, easy to implement ways for that community to celebrate its placeness, but everyone doesn't have to be the same. And then finally, this notion of recharging is just using these spaces, and we have a lot of pop shops being used in San Francisco that basically between leases, people are able to set up little experimental shops. And so rather than just having all of this boarded up space down Market Street, allowing entrepreneurs to test out their ideas. So bringing in the notion that we know works when we design cities and government programs. We know rapid prototyping works. So why not, if we know that it works, why not allow our entrepreneurs in our cities to actually try out their products and art galleries and things like that. So the theme of this is really that small acts have this huge impact, that you don't need to take on this enormous program to actually start to make real change. And in fact, this is, I think Scott brought this up, it's like this is the time to think differently. Like everything we've done in the past has sort of gotten us into this situation. And so we finally have permission to really radically try new things. This presentation's up at that URL for anyone who's interested in it as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me. I'm Dan McGinn with Eldorado Architects, and so I'm from Kansas City, and it's just really great to be here. And I want to really thank Good Magazine for bringing us down, and for all of you to allow designers to have a chance to kind of spout for an hour or so. So really appreciate that. I'm I'm going to give a brief presentation on the potential to design for community, to design situations and experiences that can actually result in increased urban dynamism. My talk is going to hit on a topic that came up in a question from Memphis. The question poser wondered, how can we reconnect all the disconnected areas of Memphis? All of the people, ideas, and events occurring on a neighborhood scale to create a more dynamic city. We're dealing with the same exact issue here in Kansas City, and I suspect other cities represented here are all in the same boat. So I'll take a few minutes to talk about what we've been up to, and perhaps some of it is relevant to Memphis. I think so, and other cities facing the same challenges. And I should mention that a principle, I'll be showing 4 principles as well, total of 8 principles to deal with. Should mention that the principle that overrides everything I'll talk about is the importance of maintaining a sense of humor in a recession. So this slide shows greater downtown Kansas City, which in turn looks quite similar to a number of other cities, Memphis included, except of course, you see barbecue in the lower slide there, except of course, our barbecue might be a little bit better than Memphis. We can talk about that later. Like many cities, our downtown is a collection of separate neighborhoods separated by interstate highways, shown dashed in yellow. And of course, the interstates end up affecting shadow areas far greater than their actual footprints. So this I referred in the last slide to the shadow areas that are associated with interstates. It's not just the width of the interstate, it's the shadow on either side that really is a negative feature. This is what Kansas City feels like to me many days, separate neighborhoods kind of choked out from each other. So I'm going to take a quick look at 4 ideas to break the chokehold and reconnect the community at large. As you'll see, some of the ideas are pretty conventional, some of them are unconventional, and one of them involves orangutans. Okay, so how can you design for community? Principle number 1, stitch the districts. This has to do directly with the connective tissue that is in between the different neighborhoods of a city. It's a simple infrastructural idea my firm has been working on in Kansas City. We've worked on with a couple of artists to improve the pedestrian experience over the interstates. So far, we've collaborated on 5 bridges in town. Lots more to go. The goal here is twofold, primarily to entice pedestrians to cross over and to then actively engage in an experience. Secondarily, to create a pretty cool experience from below at 75 miles an hour, kind of rapid branding for the hyper-tourist. Those last slides were with James Woodfill. This is with the motion graphics firm in Kansas City called MK12. And we really recommend working together with artists on this. We have amazing respect for artists. I'm not sure when this is going to advance automatically or not, but okay, there. Principle number 2, occupy the gaps. It's pretty simple as an idea, really. Our city centers are missing a lot of teeth, and we need to work hard to fix the teeth that remain and replace the teeth that have fallen out. My firm's renovated and infilled about 30 sites in the downtown area, shown in the red dots, something we're extremely proud of. This might be the most important slide I'll show today. Previous slide showed our projects as red dots. We want other firms and developers and entrepreneurs in Kansas City to step up and get gritty with us, resulting in other masses of dots of colors of their choice. Lots and lots of dots. This is key, and when all the dots get dense enough, we can smile together. It's a close-up of 3 of our red dots, Center for Drug-Free Sport on the left, TWA corporate headquarters in the middle, and 5 Delaware lofts on the right. None of these started off as glamorous or overly fascinating projects. None of our projects really do. The trick is, in design, we have found, is to manufacture the fascination on every project. Laundromats, gas stations, or whatever. Good design creates a buzz. This is really interesting. This is kind of a false tooth in the urban dentistry conceit. Program in Kansas City called the Urban Culture Project, developed by David Hughes and Kate Hackman of the Charlotte Street Foundation. Idea is to work with developers and artists to utilize empty storefronts to create temporary art spaces. The program has been active for about 10 years now and has resulted in 150 professionally curated shows in 6 different sort of abandoned storefront venues, and there very likely might be similar arts organizations in your city. Highly recommend getting involved with those. That's www.charlottestreet.org if you can't see it on the bottom. Moving right along, designing community principle number 3, have some fun, picking on Enrique's point earlier. The idea here is that vibrant cities have an element of surprise in them, and you can design that surprise. This is a group in New York called Improv Everywhere. Their mission is to cause scenes of chaos and joy in New York through an ongoing series of cleverly staged actions. So this guy gave out 2,000 high fives in an hour. This is one of my favorites. This is a staged suicide jumper from a 4-foot ledge. Got to check out their website. But you can see the concerned friend on the right eventually talked him down. 300 people looked on, and all of these things have just affected tens of thousands of people, giving them a moment that they will never forget. Principle number 4, the most interesting one maybe, have some fear. This is also about designing for surprise. We were so inspired by improv everywhere at El Dorado, we started proposing some urban scale interactions of our own. Social goals are similar, but program's a little edgier. First project involves releasing about 80 orangutans into the city. And the second involves establishing a network of urban volcanoes circling downtown, currently in the conceptual design phase. Lots of sparks and smoke, but only mildly dangerous, just kind of warm lava. Some real pushback on this from city fathers, but let's see how that goes. The idea on both of these is that you can design communities of necessity. Humans have a tendency to band together in times of strife. We group together to deal with infiltrations of invading forces, the others, and natural disasters. Currently, some of the singular neighborhoods in downtown Kansas City are bickering with each other over all kinds of issues, funding, and we think that this will help them bond together. So to be honest, the volcanoes are proving to be kind of problematic. The lava is more toxic than we thought. We're having much better luck on the orangutan project. Our breeding program is way ahead of schedule, and the slide on the right shows a mock occupation we staged in January. Might sound a little far-fetched, but we're not the first ones to have come up with this idea. Siena has its horses, Pamplona has its bulls, Memphis has its ducks. Humans become highly fascinated when animals insinuate themselves into urban environments. It could be that there's something instinctual there, or maybe we're just bored. I'm not sure. So we know it's not going to be easy. We predict that it'll be met with some resistance, but that's really the point. Humans simultaneously desire and dread ape invasions. It seems we have a complex relationship with our cousins. A lot of movies about the point, along with about 15% of Edgar Allan Poe's stories have to do with ape invasions. We're relatively confident it will end well, though. We predict our communities will come together, deal with the orangutans. Eventually, they'll be welcomed into our own communities, and there's even the possibility for some interspecies community building. I'm really excited about that. So, in summary, when Good Magazine asked me to respond to the questions posed by the readers, I saw a consistent theme. How can you design and promote how can you design to promote community? So I posed this question to my partners at El Dorado, and the answer became pretty clear, pretty quick. For Kansas City, Memphis, or just about anywhere else, stitch the districts, occupy the gaps, have some fun, and then release the orangutans.
So I guess we should get started. This is supposed to be a conversation, but I'm going to help just act as a kind of moderator as well, and then just get the juices going. So we should get started if you have your coffee ready. For me, it's a fantastic treat to be here next to Enrique Peñalosa, the ex-mayor of, former mayor of Bogota. And I will explain, of course, the reason why it's so exciting to be next to him. I am a local architect, and part of the issue here is just also to locate ourselves, at least that should be my task, because we are barely 20 minutes away from one of the most contested borders in the world. We're barely 20 minutes away from Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. And so I want to elucidate a couple of issues about what it means to be here, what it means to work at one of the most volatile, most interesting urban laboratories in this cross-border condition. Of course, Latin America ends somehow 20 minutes down south, but of course that's not necessarily true. It has begun to seep into the very nature of our culture in this country. So for me, it's very important to be next to Enrique because he's been such an inspirational figure in terms of leadership and to really get to the task of understanding what we must do in this transformative process in tangible ways. So I wanted to quickly begin just to locate a couple of issues. In the context of the conversation, already I can see that the designers who presented earlier, I'm a designer myself, there is a whole attention to this micro scale, to the kind of informal economies, the kind of dynamics that in the end, they have not been in the hands of designers. They have been part of the everyday. They have been part of the intelligence of people working in grassroots efforts within communities and neighborhoods that hopefully finally we as designers can begin to tap into. So part of the agenda also for me is understanding the role of social capital in this intelligence on the ground. So I wanted to begin, actually, if I can put the first slide, just have 3 images to show in the context of this introduction. And I hate to show slides with a lot of text, but I could not help put on the screen the part of an editorial essay or article in the New York Times two weekends ago by Thomas Friedman, where he says, let's pause quickly and let's get to the point, a very radical question. What if the crisis of 2008 represents something much more fundamental than a deep recession? What if it is telling us that the whole growth model we created over the last 50 years is simply unsustainable economically and ecologically, and that 2008 was when we hit the wall, when Mother Nature and the market both said no more? And in my mind, I was thinking, my God, this sounds like an urban Ponzi scheme. You know, and then I compared that to another piece that I wanted to share with you. I was recently in a conference in the East Coast, and Jim Kunstler, the author of the book Geography of Nowhere, got up to the podium and in a kind of he was kind of upset, and he said, I cannot believe it. You know, I've been traveling across the country, and it seems everybody's clamoring for solutions. He says, at the same time, I'm beginning to get the feeling that all the solutions we want is just to maintain a status quo. He pointed at a very specific issue, and this, again, when we're talking about solutions, what are we talking about? Is that solutions? Can I have this next slide, please? For me, it's an important issue because, as you must understand, that not only I would like to represent the border territory, but California, Southern California is the mother, is the capital of selfish urbanization, of oil-hungry infrastructure. Probably this is an emblematic figure of that. The next one, please. He was talking about how solutions are just a way to maintain a way of living, a wasteful, status quo, he said. And that really drove home a very important idea. He said, we must think not of solutions, but of creative responses to produce different arrangements, he said, in the way we live. He was also talking about how discouraged he was about the fact that everybody wanted to have a hybrid car, when in reality the problem was about the car itself. I mean, about creating different alternatives and so on. So what I wanted to, maybe I am realizing that I shouldn't take too much time because it is Enrique who needs to share his point of view. But I wanted to elucidate and be provocative about a couple of points. We all agree that global warming is really seen particularly through the lens of environmental crisis. I think it's very important to put it through the lens of a cultural crisis primarily, and this is what Jim Kunstler was getting at. This is how I interpret it. It's a cultural crisis in the need for all of our institutions to re-engage the public differently. It produces these new arrangements. That, of course, means what we keep talking ad nauseum recently. We have an opportunity to rethink the institutions. What does that mean? We have an opportunity to produce different ways of doing and thinking, and ultimately of producing different types of leadership, new politics, new economics. I'm trying to get closer to Bogota in a moment. So in that sense, I feel, and this is the reason I'm excited to be next to Enrique, because so far in the last years, we've been just looking, our gaze has been concentrated in the Dubais of the world, in the Shanghais of the world, in the places of mega economic power, thinking that only economic value can solve problems. I think finally, as some of the designers earlier showed, we might be looking at places of scarcity or other arrangements having to do with micro scales and the kind of fine-tuning of relationships between communities and institutions. So it is the intelligence of social capital, what I'm talking about, that seems to be compelling places of scarcity where we can harvest ideas to rethink the way we have been doing things, the way we've been growing. I don't have any problems with growth But I think that, because this is what you were getting at, we need to talk about density as complexity and so on. But I think we have to question the way we've been growing. So this takes me again to Latin America, because living in San Diego, I've been telling all my friends, finally, it's going to be clear that the third world will teach the first in terms of social sustainability and other economic models and other ways of calibrating the relationship of infrastructure to communities. I've been getting very worried that even the most progressive government, as the one of the Obama administration, is talking about infrastructure in such reductive ways, fixing roads, freeway, retrofitting, etc. I would like to speak, of course, of the relationship of transportation infrastructure to public space, to mobility in more intelligent ways, to calibrate that relationship again. Housing, we keep talking about housing as just a bunch of units spread on the landscape. We need to rethink how housing relates to social service, to public space, to other types of programming or land use considerations. Imagine density continues to be perpetuated across the board as an amount of units per acre. I think that it's time to understand that in neighborhoods, density can be measured as an amount of socioeconomic exchanges per acre. That produces a very different idea of city. And it worries me also that earlier this morning in the interview, what is his name, from the White House, he said, we need to create jobs to buy cars. For me, it's a fundamental also problem is that we need to recalibrate, again, what do we mean as we move from being just consumers to citizens, hopefully, once more. And I think that that is part of what I wanted to open up now in terms of Enrique and his experience. Because as we begin to talk about innovation, as we begin to talk about relying on the kind of grassroots efforts at times, but primarily very different ideas about what infrastructure means, and this triangulation of public space, mobility, and infrastructure, and of course, leadership. So here's a person who, of course, I don't know how many of you in the audience know, revolutionized this aspect by proposing a very different idea of mobility and transportation infrastructure in his city of Bogota as mayor. So sorry for the long introduction. I wanted to locate ourselves a bit in the context of the border, finally, because the reconfiguration in Latin America as mayors, presidents from the top down are really looking at social networks, at informal economies, at a very forceful and aggressive idea of innovation. It has created, in my mind, a kind of shape that has reconfigured Latin America as the only place where very progressive ideas, in this case, across the world, are really being produced from the top down. And that shape ends 20 minutes away here as San Diego and Tijuana really produce this very interesting relationship between places of mega wealth and sectors of scarcity of poverty. So, Enrique, would you mind then maybe just beginning to talk about this through the lens of your experience in Bogota?
Thank you, Teddy. I don't know if this microphone working well. And thank you. I'm very thankful for being invited here to see us two cities, to be with Carl. It's a great honor to be with Mayor Daley, whom I have admired for a long time. And I will say, as I have a presentation tomorrow with him, I will explain tomorrow why is it that I admire him. It's not just a formalism. I don't agree that with Friedman that says that we will hit the wall and the people will not, the societies will not get richer. But I think regardless of whether we will have more or less growth, clearly there is not beyond a certain minimum, there is not a correlation between wealth and happiness, which is what really matters. To me, anyway, it's much more fun than to have this CEO's pleasures of being in a $45 million private jet or a $40 million yacht. It's much more fun to ride a bicycle than to be in these toys that are more about status than about fun in a place where it's safe. So we really have to rethink our cities because of very fundamental problems. Today, we tell any 3-year-old child in the world, watch out, a car. And the child jumps in terror, and with a good reason, because there are more than 200,000 children who are killed by cars every year in the world. So I think in 200 years, okay, thank you. Today we think of London of 1800 as a horrible place to live. It was overcrowded, it was polluted, yet at that time, London was the most admired and imitated city in the world. I think in 200 years, we will say, how could people live in how could people live in those horrible cities of the year 2010, where children grew in terror of getting killed? But the most amazing thing is not that children grow in fear of getting killed, but that we think is normal, that's what we have achieved. Yet we have had cities for 5,000 years. And for 5,000 years, all streets were for people only. Even if we look at pictures of New York or Paris in the year 9010, everybody's walking in the streets. So this is a new city that we made in the 20th century, a horrible living environment which was more friendlier to cars than to people. Even all around here in this beautiful environment, it's very narrow sidewalks, very wide streets for very fast cars. It's not a very pleasant place to be despite these fancy gardens. It's very boring to walk because there is no places to go to a shop nearby. You don't find people in the streets. I think the issue is, do we have really clear what we want? Do we have a shared vision? I mean, if we ask people in the street, anybody in the street will tell us what their ideal home is. They will tell us exactly what it is, in which neighborhood, what the size, whether you have a balcony, what color, whether you have a rug, or what color the walls will be painted. But actually, we spend more time, at least awake, out of our homes than inside our homes. And we have no idea how, most people would not know how, if we ask them, what your ideal city is, people would not know what the width of sidewalks, what the transportation system, what the height of buildings. How would we mix shops and transportation? Shops and residential, I'm sorry. So I think we have to be daring. I mean, in terms of creativity, it's very interesting that these people in the creative side, these creators, these designers were invited, because I think we have to do some very radical changes. For example, in Bogota, let me tell you what we did, some experiments. We did, for example, a 25, like a kilometer, like about 18-mile long pedestrian and bicycle street only, through some very dense areas, not some sort of, or not next to a river or anything, just, but I would say, how would you, if any of you, even in any, doesn't matter if you live in a suburb or in a city, imagine how you would improve your quality of life to have, within a few blocks of your home, to enter a 50-mile long pedestrian and bicycle street only, where you would not hear noise, where you could go carry a baby stroller, where your children would not be afraid of being let off your parents' hands. It's a different concept, very cheap, very low. I mean, most of the things that we have to do about cities have to do with very difficult political decisions. It's not so much with having more money, but with having difficult political decisions. I like to see, to remind of an image. When we see planet Earth from space, it looks like this beautiful blue, self-sufficient spaceship, which floats in space without known destination. And then we all feel so close to each other, all humans. We share this destiny. Yet once we come down here, we see we are not so close. First, especially if you have a Colombian passport, it's very difficult to go to most countries in the world. You have to get a visa, and it's difficult. And even inside your country, most land is private. Almost the whole country is private. And if you go into this private land, you can get killed. It's not a minor danger. And so you go to your city, and then the city is really private space. If you go into private spaces, you get killed. And then if you go into the street space, you also get killed by the cars there. So all this to emphasize that out of the whole planet, the only microscopic piece of the planet that is open to us all is public pedestrian space in our cities. So I like to really try to emphasize that really the most important part of cities, where we create equality, where we feel well, where we feel safe, what makes really a difference in cities. There are many other aspects as well, perhaps, but the most crucial one is public pedestrian space. Sidewalks, bicycle ways, parks. How do we do that? Do we dare do some radical things that maybe take away all this parking along street in some places and take half this street to make just a wide pedestrian street only? Why don't we dare think really different? And I think also we have to come to a point that there is a conflict between a city that is very friendly to cars and a city that is very friendly to people, regardless whether these hybrids or not. They kill just as easily. So there is a conflict. How the most valuable resource that a city has, that we have as citizens, more valuable than oil or than gold, is this space between buildings, road space. And how do we want to distribute this between pedestrians, bicycles, public transport, and cars? Let's not go look to transit engineers for them to give us a solution. There is no such a thing as a technical solution to how much space do we have to give to cars. This is a political decision. If there was less space for cars in New York or in London, there will be less cars. If there is more space for cars, there will be more cars. It's very clear today that to have bigger roads do not solve any mobility issues, because actually what creates traffic jams is not the number of cars, but the length of trips and the number of trips. So this is the issue that I think we have to think about. How do we want to distribute? How do we want to distribute this? I like to end this simply saying that for many reasons, which is not the case now, clearly we all want density today. And I will appeal to the traditional definition of density. Because many of the needs that we have as humans in a good city is a city that where we can walk. And walk does not just mean to have wide sidewalks, it means destinations. So we need to have shops where to walk to. If you have to take a car to go buy milk or bread, the city is not well designed. It's not a good human environment. I mean, you should be able to walk. And then if many people walk, so you will see people. Another need that we have, we need to see people. When shopping malls replace public space as a meeting place for people, it's a symptom that a city is sick. Because clearly, in shopping malls, first of all, we have shopping malls that are upscale, low scale, so the poor people feel uncomfortable in the upscale shopping mall. If you go as tourists to a city that you don't know, what is it that you ask the concierge? Where can you go, walk, and see people? And if the concierge tells you to go to the mall, you never go back to this city or never advise anybody to go, because I mean, if they blindfold you and they put you inside a mall, you don't even know where you are. You know if you are in Denver or in Miami or in Bangkok or in Bogota, because all the malls are the same. They are kept at the same temperature. With the globalization, you have the same shops inside the mall. So you don't see the trees, you don't see the mountains, you don't see the ocean, you don't see the birds, you don't see the architecture. So this is again to emphasize what we have to, when we are trying to improve our cities, I think, how do we improve the public pedestrian space of our cities? How can we do it? And I think this is a great challenge.
This is before, because we just have 45 minutes and the time will escape and already escaped, but I wanted to get to more specific issues, and I wanted to ask you if I have the opportunity to have you here, because precisely as I was saying earlier, this is a moment when an administration like Obama administration and the shifts that are occurring in our very country can in fact refer to other cultures, refer to the best practices that have emerged in other environments, such as in Colombia. It's amazing the amount of projects that have been incredibly successful in Latin America, from Curitiba to Medellin, to Bogota, to Sao Paulo in Brazil, very progressive governments that are reorienting a way of, again, doing things. Coming from Guatemala, and I never thought that I was going to be missing a benevolent dictator that would really say, this is good, let's do it, such as a Latin American mayor of Chicago. I was thinking that there is something about the actual procedures in producing news.
You don't mean that there is a benevolent dictator as mayor of Chicago?
Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that behind these amazing success stories, like the one in Bogota, there is a process. There is a political and economic process that has been designed, talking about design and the power of design, by leaders like you. There is an issue that we are facing right now. I couldn't believe when they were saying that Obama was the spokesman of European-style socialism. It's like as medieval as anything that the Taliban could say. The point is that we are facing the fact that either we are a country of the I or a country of the we. And I think that there's issues about taxation. There's issues about urban pedagogy, as I understand in many projects in Colombia, paved the way for many of the projects that were successful, this elevating of a kind of civic consciousness about the meaning of these things. There is also the issue of hybridity, the wonderful projects that Sergio Fajardo has been working in Medellin, inventing hybrids between public space and libraries and knowledge. A lot of ideas that we could be harvesting or importing into our context. So quickly, it's just, would you mind just talking about this issue of how, again, you were able to push this idea? What is really the core and the more essential part of the project in Bogota?
Well, I would say that I still believe that equality is important. I mean, it did not die with communism. Not income equality, but perhaps quality of life equality. Or in every constitution, the first article says that all citizens are equal before the law. A consequence of that, which is explicit in some constitutions, implicit in all others, is that public good prevails over private interest. This is, for example, why Mayor Daley was able to take over a very exclusive private airport in order to turn it into public space, because he's constructing democracy, he's constructing equality. But, and I think this is the guiding principle, and it's amazing that I try to do all kinds of things to create equality, and then I am invited to many places as a speaker on environment and environmental policies. But actually, I was not really trying to do environmental policies. I was trying to create social justice. But amazingly, when you try to do one thing, they are the same policies. And when we try to promote public transport, when we try to promote public spaces, when we try to promote bicycle use, we are creating equality, but we also creating more sustainable. So it's fascinating that the two objectives are coincidental. I like to make something reference in particular to the United States. Clearly, the most important challenge, urban challenge in the United States has been related is how to create higher density, because higher density is necessary for more environmental cities in order to have the only way to have public transport work is to have higher density, because good public transport is one that has low cost and high frequency. If you have a spread out city, you cannot have low cost and high frequency. So if you have a compact city, you can have bicycles, you can have public transport, you can have taxis. I mean, a taxi in Manhattan will cost you maybe $10 from one extreme to the other, maybe $15. Here in San Diego, from one extreme to the other, it will cost you $150 or something like this. So, so all things work well. But we have to teach people why do people like to go to the suburbs? This is not because they are dumb or something like that. What is it that suburbs provide? Mayor Daley said that it was good education. I think that's one of the things that you have to provide. But I don't think that's all, because only 20% of homes in the United States have school-aged children. So still the other 80%. What are the other 80% people who do not have school-aged children find in suburbs? I think basically is, for example, pedestrian spaces, places to be able to ride a bicycle, contact with nature. So I think you can provide many of these things in a city, many of these things that people are seeking in the suburbs in more dense environments. The great schools, the fully protected pedestrian and bicycle way so that people can ride a bicycle safe without having to go out in a far out suburb, green things. And we have to find out what are these things. And we have to teach people that density does not mean 30-story high buildings. Actually, most successful environments where you have high density, from Boston downtown, or the Village in New York, or Broma in Stockholm, or Paris, or Zurich, or Florence, is basically 4, 5, 6-story high buildings. But people, when we talk density, everybody understands something different in their head. The word density scares people because each person has a different idea of density in their mind. But still we have to make some painful decisions to some. We have to demolish some of these nice suburban houses and put 5 or 6-story high buildings there if we want higher density. This is extremely important for the environment, for public transport. And we did, so in Bogota, for example, we started to build specifically protected bicycle ways. We built more than 350 kilometers of protected bicycle ways. And we were able to increase from practically 0 to 5% the people using bicycles every day. This is about 350,000 people riding bicycles every day. I would say a bicycle way is extremely important because it protects citizens, but it's also a very powerful symbol that shows that a citizen on a $30 bicycle is equally important to one on a $30,000 car. So it's again a means to create equality, to create equity. Here it was mentioned this morning that people, the low-income people who were downtown or who were in different places could not go to their jobs very far because there was no public transport, no low cost. So even in the United States, for example, there are people who earn, for anybody who earns less than $50,000 a year, to have a car is a huge investment. And the space to keep the car, and the insurance and everything. So if they are able to avoid having a car, so this can increase very significantly the quality of life. So I think when we are talking about bicycles, walking, pedestrian, even though it's the United States, even here, this has a meaning not only in terms of quality of life, but also in terms of equity. But I think, why do the Dutch use more bicycles than the US? It's not because, only because it's not that they are different in their genes. It's also because they took the political decision to create the infrastructure and promote bicycles. And for San Diego, for example, maybe the best weather in the world, in the place where we are, for bicycling. No rain, not too cold, not too hot. And now we have some new machines. I think we'll change cities towards the future. I think they are electric bicycles. Electric bicycles, you plug them at night, and then it will give you 50 miles the next day. It's not an electric motorcycle, you have to pedal. So even in a city with hills, such as San Diego, you can easily use an electric, as long as you have a safe infrastructure for bicycles. But then it's a chicken and an egg quandary. You have to start, and somebody has to take the political risks to take away some parking space, perhaps, and to make these type of things. At least in our city, it was crucial in changing people's attitudes towards, for example, riding bicycles.
So I think that, unfortunately, there is so much more that we could be talking about in this context, again, in the relationship of, I think I would say, in terms of my own interest, the United States and Latin America. I think that it would have been great, in fact, to share with many of you who are coming from out of town, really what is the nature of this territory, this border territory. This is not just San Diego, again, as I was saying, there is Tijuana next door. And I think that there is no other place in the world, I could say, that can serve as an urban laboratory to compress many of the issues that have been very essential in our debate, in our conversation. You can imagine here in 60 linear miles, San Diego, Tijuana, across the border, the politics of surveillance, cheap labor, immigration, density, sprawl, informal, formal dynamics. And not only that, but there is no other place in the world where you would find some of the wealthiest real estate as the one found just around La Jolla or in Rancho Santa Fe, barely 30 minutes away from some of the poorest settlements in Latin America. So I think this dramatic proximity of wealth and poverty is at the center of our discussion. And I think that ultimately, as we look at the best practices in Latin America, I think that we have to continue researching really what made them possible. I think that if I was to dissect many of these successful projects, it's leaders like Enrique Peñalosa who have mediated between top and down, between large infrastructural idea of transportation, but also the kind of social networks or dynamics on the ground, I think. This act of negotiation between the large and the small is really once more at the stake in our conversation. So I just wanted to end by that ultimately probably there is one issue in the context of the public realm is redefining it in some ways and in so doing also redefine a sense of ownership. I think that what has become clear in our context is that in the next years we have to fundamentally redefine what private property is in relationship to public infrastructure and public space. So too many ideas to discuss in 45 minutes, but nevertheless for me it's an amazing treat to be next to you, Enrique, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.